program. So she's going to talk a lot about that today, and we're really excited to get into it. I'm going to start off by talking about Recology, our programs here, our focus on reducing, reusing. Erin will step in. She'll talk a lot about our compost program, and then Felicia will follow it up later on. We're going to be talking about how you can make a difference as well. So if you've got any tips or suggestions, challenges in leading a low impact lifestyle, feel free to type those into the chat as we go along. We're going to try to crowdsource some suggestions and those challenges. So fill up the chat with those. We'll talk about those at the end. And we'll stop a few times throughout the presentation to address any questions that you've got. So you can throw any questions in the Q&A. We'll just try to keep those two separate. Cool. So ask us a lot of questions because there's a lot of information that we're going to be going over, and some of it's a little bit complicated. Recology has been around for over 100 years. Huge history here in San Francisco. At the beginnings, San Francisco was attracting a lot of people from around the globe for gold digging. But other people came looking for other types of work as well. So we've got our immigrants from the Genoa region in Italy that came over here, and they faced a lot of discrimination. They were looking for work and weren't really finding it. So they found work doing what no one else really wanted to do at the time, which was recycling. And so they went around and they picked out these discarded materials and they collected them and sorted them right in the back of these horse-drawn wagons, all for reuse. So that reuse mentality has always been with the company, and it's just really evolved over the years into what it is today. So today it looks very different. And in 1986, recent history, the company officially transitioned to an entirely employee-owned company. So we've got a stock ownership plan, and we're the largest employee-owned company in the industry. So that really holds our company accountable to the values of the people that work here, and that's really reflected in our mission and our vision, which is to envision a world without waste. So we want to make sure that we're reusing our materials to the best and highest use. And that means not just taking the easiest route with our materials, but really, really working to create those circular economies and help out our planet as well. So one of the reasons that Recology has been so successful in San Francisco is because we have a really strong partnership with the city, and we've partnered with them on a lot of different initiatives over the years. I'll just mention a few. We implemented curbside recycling for all of San Francisco really early on in 1989, banned plastic bags and styrofoam in the early 2000s. In 2009, we were then the first major city in the country to implement curbside composting. 2 years later, very quickly afterwards, we collected our 1 millionth ton of compost, which really proved that this citywide program can work. And then in 2012, the city hit a huge landmark, 80% diversion from landfill rate. And our most current goal is to reduce landfill-bound material by 50% and to reduce total bin generation by 15%, all by 2030. So we still have really high, ambitious goals that we're striving for today. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our programs now, and I'm going to hand it over to Erin in just a second. We're going to talk about our compost process, which is basically speeding up the natural decomposition process that happens in nature. And people from all over the planet, all throughout human history, have made their own methods of composting. And Recology has made our own as well that really suits the needs of our large-scale cities and our customers. So in San Francisco, we accept 3 different types of materials. We've got food scraps, which is all different types of food scraps, and a lot of backyard composting programs or small scale programs, they don't accept certain materials like meat or bones, but we can accept those items, dairy, shells, whatever you've got can all go in here. Food soiled paper, like a pizza box or a to-go container, a napkin or tissue, that stuff can all go in here as well. And then our last one is yard waste. So cut grass, branches, whatever you've got can all go in here as well. So any of these natural plant-based, animal-based materials can go in here. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Erin at this point, who's going to take us a little more in depth with our organics program.
Thank you very much. So my name is Erin Levine, and I am the account manager with the Recology Organics group. And so I'm here today to tell you a little more about Recology Organics and our robust compost collection and processing. So we actually started experimenting with collecting compost in '99. And since then, we've grown to become the largest composter on the West Coast. We now operate 8 facilities throughout California and Oregon. And last year, we accepted 800,000 tons of material into our site. So that included the yard trimmings, food scraps, and that we processed into finished compost, and we sold 250,000 of those tons last year. Huge volumes that we produce. And we also have made some adjustments to our site over the years to improve our technology and to reduce our carbon footprint on processing compost. So by implementing new systems, we've been able to reduce our air emissions by about 80% at most of our sites. And the sites that haven't transitioned will complete their transition in the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So I'll walk you through how we process compost. And we, like I said, accept the material at one of our facilities. Once it is received, the first step in the process is to sort it. So we want to remove any undesirable materials like plastic or glass, anything that won't decompose. And so we do that with a combination of human hands and with equipment. The next part of the process is sending material through a grinder. So we want to desize it. And when you reduce the size, it can really jumpstart or accelerate the decomposition process. The next part is the most critical, which is the active part of composting. So just like our bodies, composting requires water, oxygen, and we age as well as compost ages as well. So the first part of active is that we hydrate the material. So we moisture condition. So we introduce a large amount of water, which we bring the material up to about 50 or 60% moisture content. The next part is that we lay it on these aerated pipes. That's the picture on the left. And we have a constant flow of oxygen. We monitor the temperatures. That's the next big part of the process, is that we have to maintain a certain temperature, which is 131 degrees, for a minimum of 15 consecutive days in order to kill off the unwanted pathogens, the bad bacteria like E. coli or Salmonella. So we are monitoring that constantly. Once that completes the pathogen reduction phase, we take it and the microbes get to work consuming all of the good organic materials like the grass clippings and leaves and food scraps that you put in there. We then take it off the pipes and we send it to a pile to cure. So at this point, we want the temperature to come down. We want the material to become that dark, rich color and produce that nice earthy smell. So once that lasts about 30 days. And then we have our team that goes out and collects samples, sends it out to a third-party lab where we are testing to ensure the safety of the product and also for the nutrient content. And so once the testing comes back, the data sheets that we receive come back clean. In other words, that it's safe and approved for use for sale. We put it through a screener. The compost booth, we put through a screen that falls through, in some instances, it's 1/4 of an inch. When it falls through the screen, that's the material that we sell as finished compost. And then anything above that, we use on site for erosion control. Next slide, please. So, and our compost meets the industry's highest quality standards. So we have 3 labels or certifications on our compost. One is through the U.S. Composting Council, and this ensures that we test our material regularly. It depends on the volume that each site produces, and that we meet certain criteria for nutrients and for safety. So things, not just the bacteria, but heavy metals or inerts in the compost. They'll let us know that the compost is then safe for sale. And further, we're listed by OMRI, and we're registered by the Food and Ag Department. So those two labels mean that we can sell our compost to growers that grow organically. So our compost is approved for use on organic farms. Next slide, please. So mainly our compost is sold to the agricultural community. That's more than half, or more than maybe 60% of our compost ends up in vineyards, orchards, and various farms, ranch lands. But there also are a lot of other uses and benefits to the compost. Compost is considered nature's fertilizer. It's an alternative to synthetic fertilizer, and it provides a slow release of nutrients over time. So there are benefits that are realized slowly, of course. It usually takes about 3 years for most people to realize the true benefits, all the good bacteria that are in there. It's teeming with microorganisms. And we also provide material to landscape material yards, which then sell to homeowners. So backyard gardeners are using our compost. We sell it to landscapers. We work with quite a few cities to provide it for medians and parks, various turf applications. So there's a wide variety of end uses. But the most exciting, and what I've been focused on in my work in Recology Organics, is working with farmers, next slide please, to work with the Healthy Soils Program. So this has been a grant that's been put forth by the California Department of Food and Ag, and it's part of the greenhouse gas reduction plan that Governor Brown put in place several years ago. So this program is very exciting because it promotes the use of regenerative agriculture practices, one of which includes compost application. So there's lots and lots of research that shows by using compost, we can help lock down or draw down the carbon from the atmosphere and lock it into the soil, and it can be stored there for decades. So there's very promising research, and we have partnered and participated with about 10 grant recipients over the last 2 years to provide over 1,600 tons of compost to these research projects. One in particular that we closely partnered with was in the Central Valley, and this rancher has a certified organic grass-fed cattle operation, and they operate several hundred acres. So we provided the compost to them, and we have closely monitored the soil reports which has all shown very promising initial data, which is that the nutrients have all gone up, the soil organic matter, which is a major indicator that carbon is being sequestered, has all increased. Next slide, please. It's really hard to show the carbon being locked down, but what I can show you, and what's very visible, is this lush grass. So after even 1 year of applying compost, then this ranch, it's called Kistler Santo Domingo Ranch. Their neighbors commented to them how just green their grass stayed, and how did they do this? And it became very obvious that the compost that was the only difference they made from 1 year to the next. So it became evident that the compost was the right choice, and also that we're going to have 1 more year. So it's a 3-year program, and this will be the 3rd year in the fall. So we'll have more data to even show with the soil reports as we continue to monitor that. So beyond the vibrant grass, they had more hay bales from 1 year to the next. And then they had a significant reduction in their calf mortality. And there's no hard evidence. These are all anecdotal benefits, but we can potentially say that because the grass was so much more nutrient dense and the soil was so much healthier, that they had this response from the calf mortality reduction, and then their moisture was retained. They said when they picked up any soil, they could feel that it was really moist, and they just had a very good response overall. So we're really excited to have this partnership and continue all the research on sequestering carbon using compost. So I'm going to hand it over, and if there are a few questions, I don't know what the timing's like, but maybe I can take a couple.
Thanks, Erin. I don't see any questions right now, but if you have any questions about compost or for Erin before she heads out today, feel free to type those in there. I'll just take a pause because it takes a couple seconds to type in case anyone
I'll just say that we really do appreciate people participating with proper disposal and making their compost as clean as possible, because it really is truly ending up in a ranch or farm in your local community. We usually keep the compost within a 100-mile radius, and we have strong following. So it's really important that we get good, clean material. So anything you can do to help us out is very much appreciated from the compost receiving end.
I know glass is a really big problem in compost. It's really difficult to get that out there. Do you have any other difficult items?
Plastic, which we don't want to see, and neither do the farmers. And it's difficult to manage the plastic. So please don't put that in there and promote that fact to your neighbors. I thought there's a question about our branding. And so we have a brand, which is it's called Recology Organics. That's actually a branded name. And the compost has a brand called Recology Premium Compost. And that's the name that we're labeled under for the Food and Ag Department, as well as OMRI. So if you look up Recology Premium Compost, you'll find our certifications.
I see another question about egg cartons.
We would accept, in particular, if they're soiled. I know that's, if they're dry, I believe that they get placed in the recycling. I think Felicia can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that if it's soiled, we can take it in the compost. And anything fiber-based, so anything that was once alive, like including fiber, can go back into the compost. We can give it right back to the earth.
And then a compost giveaway question also.
I'm not sure if that still is this person speaking of San Francisco, or are they? Okay, so San Francisco is no longer doing compost giveaway, but we do have a few places within the city that we sell compost, and the main one and most readily available is Broadmoor Landscape, which is technically in South San Francisco, so San Francisco adjacent, but that's one place you can pick up compost locally.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Erin. If people have more questions throughout, we'll stop a few other times for questions, so we can still answer questions about compost later on. But thanks for sharing all of that knowledge.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, amazing. Cool. So compost is awesome. Erin talked about a lot of the benefits of the program. And yeah, we just keep finding more benefits of compost. It's one of the best things we can do to support our earth. But for materials that can't be composted, we definitely want to try to recycle them. So I'm going to start a quick poll here to see how much we know about recycling in San Francisco. So which of these items can go in the blue bin? If you don't mind filling that out. And then I'll go through them. We often get most of our questions about our recycling program, so really feel free to throw those in the Q&A, and we'll make sure to try to address all of the intricate questions that we may have. Okay, responses are flooding in, so thank you for filling out this poll. So I'll talk about what goes in this bin in a second, but I'll just address these ones first. Plastic water bottles can definitely be recycled. It's a hard plastic item, it's a container. You can put it in this blue bin. Plastic bags are a trickier one. So plastic bags, are really low quality plastic. They're really difficult to take and make something new with. There's not much that we can use them to make. And additionally, plastic bags get stuck in the gears of our machines and they can jam our machines. They'll stop the whole sorting process where we have to go fish them all out. So if you've got a plastic bag, please do not put it in the blue bin. Those flimsy soft plastics will go in the black landfill bin. Milk cartons, definitely. Paper cups and cartons can be recycled. That was kind of a recent change in the past few years. So we definitely want to put those in the blue bin. We can use that paper to make new paper products. Clamshell containers are a tricky one for a lot of recycling facilities to handle. But we've got some pretty impressive technology at our facility that I'll show you later on that can handle those clamshell containers. So you can definitely recycle those. Another hard plastic in San Francisco. Aluminum foil totally can be. You can just roll it up into a ball and throw it in the bin. And then a padded shipping envelope, that one's a no. We'll put that in the landfill bin. Any packaging material like bubble wrap or an Amazon bag, any of that stuff really would go in the landfill bin. Okay, I'm going to end this poll. Thanks for participating. If you've got follow-up questions on those items, feel free to put those in the Q&A. I can go through them again. But I'm just going to talk generally about recycling right away. It's definitely confusing sometimes for a lot of people because compost is a very different program. We collect, we process, and reuse that material all in California. It's a very local circular system. Recycling is much larger. It's on this global system with a lot of moving parts. It's constantly changing. Additionally, there was a big shock to this system a few years back when China implemented a new policy called National Sword that you may have heard of. China used to import most of the world's recyclables, but mixed in a lot of the recyclables, they were finding a lot of trash. The sorting process in a lot of places wasn't really up to par. They had to deal with all of that trash at the end in their country that was kind of polluting their country. So in 2017, they put this ban in place. So they wouldn't accept any recyclables that had more than 0.5% of that trash or that item that they weren't trying to buy. Some contamination is what we call it. And so while Recology has always had a really good reputation for producing a really clean product, mostly those recyclables, not very much contamination in there. 0.5% in all of your bills is still really difficult. And so we kind of took this on to really make sure that we're able to hit this number consistently. And we totally redid our facility, invested a lot of money in getting a lot of new technology. And now we're really proud to say that we've continued to be able to get all of this material out to market. And so everything that you put in the blue bin in San Francisco, we do have a market for. We do follow up with our companies to make sure that they're using that material to make new products. And we process over 600 tons of material in San Francisco every day. So what goes in the bin? 5 different types of materials go in there. Paper is like 80% of what we take. We've got all different types of paper, receipt paper, magazines, cardboard boxes, all of it can go in here as long as it's clean and it's dry. If it was wet or dirty, had food on it, or it's really low quality paper like a napkin or egg carton like we talked about before, that will go in the compost bin. But that clean, dry paper goes in here. We've got glass jars and bottles as well. Hard, rigid plastics like that plastic water bottle or a clamshell container. Anything that holds its shape really will go in here. Empty paper cups and cartons like a milk carton or a paper cup or even aseptic packaging, which is used for a lot of like alternative milks or like a soup box, juice box. They're really complex materials. There's 7 layers of different types of material in those products, but we've got a buyer who can accept those materials and recycle the parts that can be recycled. So they'll pull all those layers apart. And then finally, metal. Generally, any metal that you have can go in here. Like I said, aluminum foil, you can roll up into a ball. The only types of metal that are a little tricky are like screws and nails. Because they're small and hard, they can get stuck in our gears, they can jam our machinery. And then metal coat hangers as well can get stuck in those gears. So those are the two things that I would just avoid putting those bins. But generally anything else made out of metal can go in here, no problem. So everything that we put in this bin has to be clean and dry because it all gets jumbled together in that bin, in the pickup car, the collection truck. Throughout this whole process, they're getting jumbled together. So if one thing is dirty or wet or has liquid in it, it's going to contaminate that paper. And after paper gets wet or dirty, it's really difficult to recycle that material. So that's why we put it all in clean and dry. And then you just want to make sure not to put it enclosed in anything. You don't want to wrap that stuff in a plastic bag because we're going to sort through all of this material. So I'm going to show you that sorting process. First, we've got a pre-sort line. It's the largest in the nation. It's got 14 stations where workers are all pulling off materials that don't belong or couldn't make it through that process. That's moving pretty quickly. So if you've got a bag of recyclables, they can't go through all of those items. They can't rip through all of those bags. So that's why it's really important for all of those items to be placed in loosely. Okay, and so then 80% of what we end up taking is paper. So a lot of our facility is dedicated towards making sure that our paper bales are really clean. There's nothing other than paper in there. So after that pre-sort line, paper moves through a bunch of different machinery. The first one is fiber screens, which are a bunch of spinning discs, basically, that will bounce lighter materials like plastic up, and the heavier or three-dimensional materials, they fall down through that process. So it kind of separates the 2D and 3D materials right away. And then next, all that paper moves through optical sorters, which use light sensors to identify different types of material. And when the sorter identifies the right type of material, it will send a really powerful blast of air to like shoot that material onto a different sort line and send it in a different direction than other materials. So you can see that kind of in action right there. And then finally, our paper passes by a quality control line where workers are reducing, or they're pulling off any other contamination that they see, any trash that made it through that process. We also have other optical sorters that are separating our plastics. So we use them to identify number 1s and number 2s, which are the easiest to recycle. There's usually more options for what you can make out of those. They're like higher quality plastics. We also recently installed 4 robots that use AI technology to further sort our plastics. They're connected to a global database of images, so they can identify materials before they even arrive on site to our facility. If something's designed in another country, they already know what it looks like because they're connected to this database, which is pretty amazing. They're also able to help us with some of our more difficult to sort materials. A lot of places don't accept like black plastics or clamshell containers because it's really difficult for optical sorters to identify. But since we've got these robots, we can still accept those materials, no problem. They're able to see those. So that one's really cool and we're excited about. But after this whole process where it's going through all these different machines, sorting these materials into different areas or piles, then we just kind of group it together. So it goes through a machine called a baler, which squeezes that material together into cubes. And you can see there's a bunch of stored bales in the background of this image. And then we'll send all of that material out to market. And so that may be domestic, maybe international. It just depends on the current pricing and demand, but we really seek out local markets when we can. And we send most of our stuff domestically. For example, though, of how close sometimes it can be, we send our glass to an East Bay facility. So some of this isn't going far at all. Creating new products with this old used material, this recycled material, generally saves a ton of energy and resources. It's a really important thing to be doing for our planet. Reduces greenhouse gases and our reliance on new natural resources or really harmful extraction processes. But some types of material are still better to use than others, even though we're accepting all these different materials in this bin. And so this reverse pyramid that we've got right here is really San Francisco specific. It may be different in your region. But metal and glass are on the top of ours because these materials can be recycled indefinitely without losing any quality. You can keep making the same product over and over forever with the same material. So a true circular system. Other materials get downcycled, so they lose quality in that recycling process. So paper can be recycled many times, but then eventually starts to lose quality. The fibers have trouble sticking together, and then it can be used to make a lower quality paper product, like an egg carton or a tissue napkin, something like that, which then can be composted. So paper can't be recycled forever, but it can. It still has a circular system when you're able to compost it. There are 7 layers of material in aseptic. Those soup boxes, those juice boxes. And so those are a little more difficult. Only some layers of that material can be recycled, and others will have to be sent to landfill. And then plastic is at the bottom of our list because plastic always gets downcycled. You generally cannot make the same type of product twice with the same plastic material. You have to throw more chemicals, more new plastic in there, and it still can't become the same object again. So plastic can only be recycled maybe once or twice before it ends up in the landfill or worse, the environment. So the plastic that we accept has a second life, but that may be the last life for that plastic. So it's definitely not ideal. I'm gonna throw out this second poll and then we can answer some questions. I just need to plug in my computer, so I'm gonna step away for just 1 second. But if Felicia wants to start reading off some of these questions, that might be great.
Yeah, totally. So there are a couple questions. So one relating to the wax cartons. So things like milk cartons or juice cartons that have sort of that waxy lining on the inside. What used to be wax is now most often actually a plastic lining. So those materials are what we call a composite material. It has multiple different materials in it. It's paper and it's plastic mixed together. Fortunately, we are able to recycle those. We found someone that's able to separate that fiber, that paper component, and recycle that from those cartons. Because it has plastic in it, it is a really big challenge if it ends up in our compost stream. So we never want any plastic in our compost stream. And so instead we are accepting those cartons in our recycling. Let's see what else we've got here. So with the film plastics, we did have a pilot program for some time where you could bundle the film plastics together. Those plastics have to be very, very clean, and it is quite challenging to find markets for that material because it is such a low grade plastic. So we really encourage folks to try and avoid using those plastics whenever possible. And then a couple other questions. So one about keeping lids on or off containers. Either way is fine. It doesn't really matter. The caps, bottle caps can be really small. So sometimes keeping them on the container is a little bit better because they make it further through the system. Really small items can sometimes fall between the sort lines or fall in between gears, and they're a little bit harder to sort. So but we do our best to try and capture that material. And then the last one about the cartons with the spouts on them. So again, you can just go ahead and put that whole container into the blue recycling bin, those cartons that have the pour spouts on them.
Awesome. Thank you. I just see one other question about items with food waste on them and rinsing. It does help a lot to rinse that material. Like I said, most of the stuff that we accept is paper. And once it gets dirty or wet, it's really difficult to recycle paper. So we want to make sure that we're able to recycle all of the things that we accept. And the cleaner something is, the more likely it is going to be recycled. And the things around it are going to be recycled too. So I suggest rinsing things out. If something's got food attached that you can just pull off quickly, that's great. A lot of things I just leave sitting in my sink with some soap for a little bit to make sure it's easy to take all that stuff off of there. Okay. Thank you, Felicia, for helping out with some of those questions. And I'll just take a look at this poll really quickly, because it is so confusing sometimes keeping track of all the things that go in this bin. So I'm going to go through them. We've got our aseptic cartons on here first. Tetra Paks, those can definitely be recycled in San Francisco. Elsewhere, it's probably going to be difficult to get these recycled. So definitely make sure if you don't live in San Francisco, what you can put in your bin, but we can here, which is great. Pizza boxes are made out of cardboard, but they get grease or food or cheese on them. So it's best to put those in the compost bin when we're finished with them. Paper coffee cups. Yeah, if they're just empty, you can recycle them after use. Magazines or any other type of paper can definitely be recycled. Wire hanger is made out of metal, but it will jam in our machinery, so we want to avoid that one. And then a shoebox is paper, it's cardboard, and it doesn't get food on it, so we can definitely recycle that here. I'm gonna end this poll. Okay, and we'll take a look at questions as we go along. I just have a couple more things to hit before I pass it over to Felicia. The first is our household hazardous waste program. So we've got our composting and recycling bin programs, but we also have additional recycling programs on site in San Francisco, like this program, which is for all of kind of the chemicals or things that would be dangerous to put in our bins. These are things that are actually illegal to put in our bins. So like pesticides, batteries, paint, motor oil, cooking oil, CFL light bulbs, which contain mercury. All of these items would be dangerous to our workers or would be dangerous in a landfill as well. So we want to make sure that these all have special recycling programs that keep us all safe. I think we're going to play just a quick video that kind of talks about this generally.
My name is Usman C. My job title is a VSPG coordinator. VSPG stands for Very Small Quantity Generator, and I've been working at Recology for 22 years. The VSPG program is a program to help our small business customer to properly dispose of the hazardous waste in accordance with federal and state regulation. It is also a convenient and cost-saving program as well. On a typical VSPG date, we get around 25 to 30 customers, and they are mostly coming from painting companies, dry cleaners, cleaning companies, and most of the time, we get paint, solvent, cleaning product like bleach, Lysol. We get some fertilizers. Those are the most item we get from our small businesses. For people to drop off cooking oil at Recology, they have to be a San Francisco resident, and they have to show a proof of residency, driver license, or utility bill. My favorite part of my job is when a customer tell me thank you and have a nice day. That make my day.
Okay, so we both have that program for San Francisco residents. You can just drop off any of that material for free, or you can call us and we'll pick it up from you. But we also, as Usman just described in the video, we've got a small business program as well, where we can accept that material from small businesses too. So that's our household hazardous waste, but we also have other types of recycling programs, like our electronic waste program. Again, this stuff would be dangerous in the bins or landfills, and there's a lot of metals in these materials that can be and should be recycled. So all of this material you can as well take to us, or we'll pick up from you, all for free in San Francisco. So anything with a battery or a cord. And then anything that doesn't fit into one of those recycling or composting programs will go in this landfill bin. And if you're using all of those recycling programs, if you're using your bins correctly, there's really not that much that goes into this landfill bin anymore. So a couple items that do though are pet waste or like diapers, kind of gross stuff that we just can't make into new things. It's gross. We've got soft plastics as well, which are really difficult to make new materials with. So plastic bags or soda can rings, whatever you've got. Another big one nowadays is disposable PPE, like masks or gloves. If you're using those and you're throwing those away after use, those would go in this landfill bin too. We've also got ceramics or other types of glass that aren't bottles or jars, like a cup or a window, and then packaging material like an Amazon bag or the bubble wrap or styrofoam packing peanuts. All of that stuff will go in this bin as well. Okay, and so I'm just going to follow up with this last slide for me. And this is our transfer station where all of our black landfill bin material will go. It just temporarily gets kind of piled together in this pit on the top photo, and then it heads over to a landfill where it will stay. So our landfill is located in Vacaville, which is 65 miles east of San Francisco. Okay. So that's all I've got. I'm going to pass it over to Felicia to take us the rest of the way.
Thanks, Elsa. And I just want to address really quickly a couple questions that came in. So what's done with the hazardous chemicals and paint? So we have a team of folks, household hazardous waste folks, who handle all of the household hazardous waste that comes in. Depending on what it is, it will get handled in a different way. So sometimes the chemicals are neutralized and then they can be disposed of safely in a traditional landfill. Sometimes they do go to specialized landfills for those chemicals. We actually recycle all of the latex paint on site. So it gets mixed into these big 5-gallon buckets, and then we give that paint out for free to the community. Excuse me. And then sometimes the other chemicals can be recycled in a special way as well. So we'll collect those and then ship them off to places where they can be recycled. And then all styrofoam does have to go into the landfill bin. Luckily in San Francisco, there is a styrofoam ban, so you shouldn't be seeing too much of it, but often you can find it in packaging that's shipped to you. So you would want to make sure that ends up in the landfill bin. So there's one material that we want to just highlight, and that is plastics. Plastics are a really important material in our society, especially for a lot of our health and safety needs. They're a relatively new material, but they are so pervasive in everything that we use. And plastics they definitely have a purpose, like I mentioned, especially for a lot of our health and safety needs. They're very important, but this material was designed to last forever. And a lot of what we use it for is just something we use one time and then throw away. So plastics, they don't ever degrade into compost. They just break down into smaller and smaller pieces, turning into what's called microplastics. Excuse me. And these microplastics often end up in our oceans or in our environment, where they can make their way into the food chain, into drinking water. And they've even found that these plastics are ending up becoming so small that they become airborne. So they end up in our air. Plastic is, of course, derived from oil and petroleum. And so it's this non-renewable resource that we're, again, using for something that we create that's just used one time. So we really encourage people to reduce the amount, especially of single-use plastics that they're using. And really just think about how we can use this material responsibly. There's definitely a time and a place for plastics, but it's not in our bodies and it's not in our oceans. And so we want to be really careful with how we're using it so that we can prevent it from getting into our environment and prevent it from affecting our health and our communities. So one thing that you can do to help with the plastic pollution is to look out for this initiative coming up on the November 2022 ballot. This initiative we are help sponsor, because what it will do is it will help clean up a lot of areas that have been impacted by plastic pollution. It'll support recycling and composting infrastructure, but most importantly, it will hold corporations accountable for creating all of this plastic material that we are using. So it can be really difficult and a little disheartening when you go to a store and you want to try to buy something that's not in plastic, but you just don't have any options. And so what this initiative will do is it will actually force those corporations to take responsibility and to take responsibility for what happens to the plastic once their consumers are done using their product. Sorry, I have a little itch in my nose. So you can learn more about this at plasticsfreeca.org. And again, keep an eye out for it on the November 2022 ballot. So a couple things that Recology is doing to help reduce plastic use, but also just reduce our impact on the environment and on our communities. There are a number of things that we're doing, and we really try to focus on what more we can do besides recycling. Recycling is really great. It creates jobs, it conserves natural resources, but that's really just the start. What we really want to be doing is rethinking all of these business as usual approaches that have gotten us to where we are today, and to really start considering how we can reduce and reuse more. And so there are a number of things that Recology is doing to do that. One thing is we provide guidance and education to both individuals through webinars like this, but also to businesses as well who are considering how they can shift their business practices to be more sustainable. We support a lot of zero waste policies and advocate for various solutions, for example, like that Plastics Free California initiative. And we also try and lead by example. So you can see on the bottom photo here, we recently had a remodel of our transfer station facility. We installed solar panels on the top of that building, and this is now the largest privately owned solar array in San Francisco. We use renewable fuels in all of our trucks. We recycle our water, and we try to practice zero waste in our offices as well by using durable cups and plates for meals, conserving energy whenever possible. So we really try to walk the walk and talk the talk. Another program that we have is our Artist in Residence program, which was started in 1990 by an artist and activist named Joe Hansen. So this program is really designed to support local artists by providing them with access to the public reuse and recycling area so they can scavenge for materials, and then we give them a studio space where they can create a body of work, which we then have a public exhibition at. In addition to supporting artists, this program is also meant to inspire individuals to think differently about resource conservation and recycling. We've had a number of different artists come through the program, all sorts of artists, from sculptors to painters to digital media artists. So it's a really interesting program. We also have a program in Portland, Seattle, and Astoria. But this is where the artists scavenge. This is our public reuse and recycling area. It's your traditional public dump. Anyone in their car or their truck can come through here and dump whatever material they don't want. It looks like a lot of cardboard, a lot of construction material, which it is, but there also are a number of treasures in here. And all the artists scavenge from this same building, and they all come up with completely different final exhibitions. So this is just a little sort of collage of some of the work from our past artists. If you're interested in learning more about our art program, we do have a webinar specifically about the Artist in Residence program that's going to happen next Thursday. And it's a monthly webinar, so you can check that out as well. I'm just going to talk really quickly about a couple artists of our current artists. So Malcolm Kenter and Rachel Marino, they started their residency back in March of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. This is what their studio space looked like back then. This is pretty much what it looks like now. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to come back to scavenge, but we are hopeful that they will be able to come back soon and pick up their residency where they left off. But their proposal was to create a miniature golf course. So you can see that they started sculpting these large kind of toy looking sculptures that they were going to set up in a little miniature golf area. So hopefully we'll be able to have folks in to play some mini golf at the end of their exhibition. Layla Talukder is our student artist. So we also have a student artist program for undergraduate or graduate students. She's really interested in fashion and the textile industry, as well as the workers who are often underrepresented or have really harsh working conditions. And so her original proposal was to create a line of clothing that had sound elements to it. But through the pandemic, she's become more interested in working on creating a line of clothing that is specific for protest wear. So things that you would wear to a protest that have multiple pockets, a place to store water, or as you can see in this photo, do something like unfurl into a protest sign. So these are a few things that we're doing, but of course, we can't do it all alone. Really, all of our individual actions are important, but they make a bigger difference when we can all work collectively together. And so I wanted to just take a few minutes. If anyone has any questions or challenges or even tips about starting a zero waste journey, living a low impact lifestyle, I'd love to hear anything that folks are maybe struggling with, or if something's really working for you, if you'd want to share that as well, go ahead and put that into the chat and we can talk a little bit about it. So I'll just give you a minute. One thing that I've been really focusing on myself is reducing food waste. So food waste is a really big problem in the US. About 40% of food that's grown is never eaten. Such a huge amount of food going to waste, a huge amount of the resources, the water, the transportation that goes into creating that food all gets wasted when it ends up in the landfill, or even if it ends up in the compost, if it's still perfectly good food to eat. And so one thing that I've been really focusing on is trying to shop smart. So when I go to the grocery store, I take an inventory of my refrigerator before I go, so I'm not buying things that I already have. I also have been trying to get really creative with how I use leftovers. So oftentimes when I make something, I will store my leftovers separately so that I can create different dishes out of those things that I had left over. And just really trying to use up everything in my fridge before going to the store again. So that's one thing that I've personally been working on. But there are lots of different ways to start living a zero waste life. Elsa, do you want to share something that you've been working on?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of things before this pandemic hit, and it kind of threw things out of whack a little bit, I think, for a lot of us. So I've been really happy that I've been able to use my reusable bag again at the grocery store instead of taking a disposable one every time. And I'm just waiting for those bulk items to come back still. So I'm excited for that. The grocery store that I go to still is kind of doing that in larger quantities. They've got like big bags of things, so I'm still able to buy things in larger amounts. And if I'm buying a lot of those dry goods in larger amounts, I'm able to cut down on the overall amount of packaging that I'm using. So I'm still able to do that, even though it's a little different now. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. So I saw one thing come in about repurposing glass and metal packaging for food or other item storage. So that is a super easy, also really low cost way to reuse or repurpose items. So if you bought something that came in a glass jar, when you're done, maybe it was peanut butter, rinsing that out, and you can use it as a Tupperware or a to-go container. So yeah, definitely repurposing that packaging would be really great. And then thinking about scaling it out. So I like this comment. It would be nice to scale this out in a way that reduces single-use consumer packaging. And so one thing that we were saying that Elsa mentioned prior to the pandemic and more stores was bulk sections, where you could actually take in a jar or your own bag and fill it up with however much of a material that you wanted. I was seeing this more and more in different grocery stores, which was really great. Hopefully we'll see that come back pretty soon. But yeah, in the meantime, we'll just have to try and reduce our packaging as best we can. So just really quickly, a couple other ways as an individual that you can help support is by using your voice. So whether that's talking about what you learned with your family or friends, or reaching out to businesses or local politicians to let them know the policies and programs that you'd want to see. But really just most importantly, connecting with your community and making sure that the actions that you're taking are not individual, bringing them to a group, because with our collective action, it's really how we make a big difference. So just really quick before we wrap up, if you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website. We have a lot of really good resources on our website. We have some more in-depth tours of our recycling facility and our transfer station that you can walk through yourself. And then if you're interested, we also have a number of programs working with past artists and residents. We have a panel series coming up very soon. On the 27th, we're going to have a panel with a couple of our past artists who use research in their art. You can check out our Instagram for highlights on past artists. And then we also have a workshop series that you can find on our YouTube channel. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for joining us. So I do have one question here about ways to reduce fabric waste, as well as ways to reuse fabric. So fabric is a really tricky one. It's very difficult to recycle. If you are unable to reuse it, it would have to go into the landfill bin. But yeah, ways to reduce fabric waste. It can be, one thing to think about is when you're purchasing clothing, purchasing for longevity, which can often be difficult because usually those things are more expensive, but they'll last much longer. So thinking about trying to buy products that you know are going to be able to maintain their quality over time. And then repurposing, cutting things up and using them as rags, if like an old t-shirt as a rag, if you can't use it anymore. You can maybe start practicing quilting, and then also mending your clothing as well is another good way to help reduce that textile waste. We actually have a really good workshop by our student artist, Layla Talakder, on our YouTube channel about 5 simple mending techniques to extend the life of your clothing. So that would be a good one to check out as well. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Hopefully you learned something new, and hopefully you'll share it with your friends and your family. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.